It is a well-known fact among honest historians that West Africans settled in America at the very least during the time Carthage dominated the Mediterranean world. The North African nation of Carthage had the largest naval fleet in the entire Mediterranean Sea, larger than Egypt, Greece, and Rome. In fact, few know that the Romans learned a superior technique of shipbuilding from the Carthaginians. This shipbuilding technology helped the Romans become the new dominant force in the Mediterranean, replacing the Carthaginians. Centuries before the Roman, and thousands of years before the European, these Africans traveled up and down the west coast of Africa and across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. Just as they established extensive trade with the entire Mediterranean world, the Carthaginians also established trade with West Africa and the Far West, better known as America. As I echo in my soon-to-be-released book, Pre-Colonial African American Agriculture, plantains were exported from ancient Africa to ancient America. Cocaine, on the other hand, was exported to ancient Africa from ancient America. We also remind the reader that when the European invaders finally escaped from Europe in the 15th century, they found that collard greens were being extensively cultivated in Hispaniola upon their arrival. Master teacher, Dr. Joseph Ben Yochanan pointed out that Europeans also discovered caches of Carthaginian money buried at a depth of 200 feet in Central America. Of course, Dr. Ivan van Sertima was instrumental in familiarizing the world with the African presence in ancient America in his great work, They Came Before Columbus. There is also record that West African kings launched at least two major fleets that went across the Atlantic 900 AD to about 1600 AD. A certain type of corn has been growing in West Africa for many centuries and is not native to West Africa. It's a type of corn which is native to Mexico and was brought back to Africa by Mali seafarers over 1,000 years ago. There is also evidence that what is referred to as Ethiopian Phoenicians were making voyages to and from ancient America. A vast amount of evidence supports the fact that there was thousands of years of trade between the Americas and Africa. This trade was apparently interrupted by the European slave trade in the early 16th century. We must never forget that so-called Native Americans and Africans had an alliance that was disrupted by European invaders. The so-called Africans and Native Americans resisted European encroachment for centuries. The Europeans, growing frustrated with the African-Native American alliance, used their own mixed-race offspring and Christianized natives and Africans to help destabilize this alliance. They made treaties with the natives that promised their own separate territory as well as money. All they had to do is break their alliance with the Africans and work as bounty hunters to help track runaway slaves. On the other hand, the Europeans promised the Africans a pseudo-freedom if they worked as enforcers of the institution of slavery. They could also gain pseudo-freedom by working as undercover agents whose job was to reveal slave insurrection conspiracies. The slaves could also gain this pseudo-form of freedom by fighting on the front line against self-emancipated black people and so-called Indians that didn't accept the white man's laws and terms. It's important to remember that while many natives and Africans accepted the white man's way of life, primarily for survival reasons, some refused to live under white authority by fighting and rebelling against white supremacy for centuries leading up to the Civil War. While the Civil War ultimately ended one aspect of slavery, the war against white supremacy terrorism continued for the next 165 years till today. There is an ongoing alliance between various groups of black people that are working to smash white supremacy. If you are not working to crush white supremacy, chances are you are a willing or unwilling ally of white supremacy. This article was written by Daku Akabo wa Akatu.